Good morning, friends. Welcome to our digital Good Friday. We have reached the darkest day in our Lenten journey. This morning's going to be a bit of a different experience. Our prayer is that as you engage with us in the story of Jesus' death, as you partake of communion in the comfort of your own home, that you might have a fresh appreciation for what Jesus accomplished on our behalf. If you haven't already got set up to join us for communion, grab some bread or some crackers, even a piece of toast, have some juice at the ready, and in a few moments we will break bread together as we remember the cross. So go ahead and pause the video if you need to for a second while you get set up and get your supplies ready. If you need to use goldfish, use goldfish. It's Good Friday, the day where we remember the cross, where we recoil at the gruesome truth that our sin nailed God to a tree. The day where we remind ourselves of the pain our iniquity has wrought. The temptation for us is to look ahead to the victory of Sunday, to excuse the wrongdoing and to move on to the reconciling. But this morning, it's good for us to sit in the tragedy, in the injustice, in the unfairness of it all, to let that mess wash over us again. Because we're in the middle of a mess right now, aren't we? And it's okay for us to sit in the mess for a few minutes this morning. It's okay for us to look at the darker things in life, because it's in those darker places that we often see the light most clearly. This morning, I want to encourage you to look upon the cross and have your heart wrenched, to be filled with sorrow once again for your own sin, for your own treachery, to feel once again the sting of remorse. Many churches turn to the last 7 words of Jesus on this day. And in the New Testament, which is in the last half of our Bible, we find the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And they record the stories of Jesus. And in those Gospels, we find 7 phrases that Jesus utters while he endures the cross. And they are traditionally, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing," in Luke 23:34. To the thief on the cross, he says, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." Luke 23:43. That's the second statement of Jesus. The third is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Matthew 27, verse 46. In John 19:26 and 27, we read Jesus looking to his mother Mary, "Woman, here is your son," speaking of John the Beloved, and then turning to John, he says, "John, here is your mother." Back in the Gospel of Luke 23:46, we read, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And as he nears the very end of his life, he cries out in John 19:28, "I am thirsty." And in 19:30, "It is finished." Each one of these phrases could be worth our time to reflect on. And maybe you want to today. Maybe you want to take some time to go through those 7 phrases and think upon all that Jesus went through and where his heart was at, where his head was at when he was looking down from the cross. Like, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing." He hangs on the cross and his first words are words of forgiveness. It's amazing grace to me that that's one of the first things Jesus thinks of as they're casting lots for his clothing, as they're hurling insults at him. He says, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing." Or the promise to the thief on the cross. They're hurling insults at him, and one of the thieves on the cross looks over and says, like, "Yeah, get us out of here. Like, this is awful. If you're who you say you are, get down off the cross and take us with you." And the other thief says, "Don't you realize? Like, we deserve to be up here. He has done nothing wrong. He's innocent." And he says, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus' words to that repentant thief are, "I promise you, today you will be with me in paradise." Such a beautiful word of reassurance for someone else who's suffering the same tragic death. But the phrase that wrenched my heart this week and caused me to catch my breath is that cry, my God, why have you forsaken me?" I won't butcher the Aramaic, but that cry coming from the mouth of the Son of God. There's some that would say that Jesus is once again fulfilling prophecy. He's giving us a shorthand for a beautiful psalm of encouragement. The words are found in the opening lines of Psalm 22. Verse 1 reads, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from my cries of anguish?" Now, some would say he's using those words just to get us thinking about the entire psalm, not just that first opening line. The way we might get people to think about the entire psalm that follows it, Psalm 23, just by quoting the first line, "The Lord is my shepherd." When I say that phrase, "the Lord is my shepherd," for those who are familiar with the psalm, it may bring images of leading beside still waters and restoring my soul. It's a psalm of great peace and comfort. And just with those first few words, you already start thinking about the rest of it. So there's some who are saying that's what Jesus was doing with Psalm 22, that it's a proclamation of trust and praise because that's how the psalm ends. There would be some who would claim that that was the point of Jesus' cry. He was clearly not distraught or wasn't feeling like he had been abandoned by the Father. It was his declaration of trust that God was still with him. And my only thought to that is, if that was Jesus' intention, why wouldn't he just quote the end of the psalm then? Why would he use those words? I would argue that we can't wrap it up in a nice little bow like that. We can't make Jesus look like he didn't suffer the complete suffering that he endured on that cross. I would argue that Jesus felt on the cross not only the excruciating physical pain, but that emotional and maybe even spiritual abandonment of the Father. And I use the word felt very intentionally there. Jesus felt. Jesus experienced the same things that we feel. He experienced the same emotions, the same heartbreak that we feel. I believe Jesus felt the words of the psalm were on point for what he was experiencing. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me? So far from my cries of anguish. The Father didn't step in and take Jesus down off the cross or deliver him from it. And maybe it was verse 6 to 8 that brought this psalm to his mind. In Psalm 22, it carries on. It says, I am a worm and not a man. I'm scorned by everyone, despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord, they say. Let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. That sounds a lot like what Jesus was enduring on the cross. He was falsely accused. He was beaten within an inch of his life. He was forced to carry his own implement of destruction, and then nails put through his wrists and feet, hanging on display with a loincloth if he was lucky, struggling for every breath, lungs burning, wounds bleeding, and a crowd of people hurling insults at him. Matthew 27:42 says, he saved others, they said, but he can't save himself. He's the great King of Israel. Let him come down now from the cross, and we will believe in him. Like I said, I imagine Jesus felt abandoned. Now, I use that word felt really carefully this morning, because I don't believe that somebody that had such an intimate relationship with the Father believed that God had completely abandoned him, but he felt it. And I think there's a profound difference there. I'm not sure if I can speak for you, but if you're like me, you've been in situations where even though you know God has not abandoned you, you don't feel like he's near. You question, where is he? Why is he not coming to save? Why is he not stepping in? Why is he not making a difference right now? You wonder where he is. What is he up to? Imagine what you would have felt like during the last 24 hours that Jesus has. Betrayed by a dear friend. Interrogated by religious leaders and the leader of government. A brutal beating, and now the pain of the cross. Might you feel abandoned? Might you wonder if God gave up on you? Might you wonder if you've somehow stepped out of line, that somehow now you're not in his favor, that he's now not with you? Remember, Jesus was fully human and fully divine. And sometimes we focus so much on his divinity and we think that, well, there's no way that he could have felt that level of abandonment. But those words are great comfort to me, because I believe Jesus was also fully human. And he experienced the depth of that abandonment. The knowledge that Jesus has felt that crushing loneliness, that he felt like God had turned his back on his situation, because I felt that way. Like, I still believe God is present, and I believe that he's with me, but I sure don't always feel it. There are days where I wonder, what is God up to? Like in this season, I know there are people facing significant challenges. The distance and the isolation that our COVID-19 measures have created are compounding already challenging situations. For some of us, our biggest complaint is we have to teach grade 7 math and help answer questions. It's frustrating to try and work from home. And those are real frustrations. But for others, they're in isolation with their abuser. For others, they're not able to see their kids who are in care. For others, they have loved ones in the hospital that they're not able to visit for fear of making them sick. And it's in those moments we can be tempted to wonder, where's God? What's he up to? We may be tempted to cry along with Jesus, Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from my cries of anguish? The next verse says, my God, I cry out by day, and you do not answer, by night, and I find no rest. When I'm feeling those things, I look to the cross. I come to the moment of Good Friday, and I see that Jesus knows how I feel. I see that Jesus experienced even greater that feeling of where is God? Where is he in all of this? That Jesus understands what we're going through. It's the cross that reminds me that God enters into those dark places. That Jesus has been in those dark places. I've said it a couple of times in the last few weeks. We need to keep our Trinitarian theology intact when we think about the cross. The cross isn't just Jesus suffering for us. The cross is what it looks like when God reveals his great love for us. That the Father is just as involved, that Jesus is God as he hangs on the cross. We don't need to pretend that the darkness is not darkness. God enters into our darkness. He does indeed meet us in the darkness. We don't need to sugarcoat how awful things are. We can admit that it's terrible. We can admit that it's awful. We can admit that it's painful. That doesn't negate our faith. That doesn't mean that we're not strong enough or we're not courageous enough to admit that we feel like sometimes God has forsaken us. We know in our heart of hearts that that's not true, but it doesn't negate how awful some of the things we walk through are. The words of Jesus tell me it's okay to cry out in the darkness and to feel the depth of it and to know that it's not the end of the story. You see, the cross is beautiful when you look at it from a certain perspective. When you look at it from the other side, when we think about Easter, when we think about his ultimate resurrection and beating death, and this being one of the darkest moments in history, it's a beautiful picture of the love of God. But it's also horrific. It is terrible. It's a reminder of the incredible evil we are capable of. It's a reminder of the unimaginable pain that Jesus went through on our behalf, and that he meets us in those dark places because he bore it all for me, for you, for all of us. Isaiah 53 says he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. And this is what we remember this morning, that he was crushed for us, that he went into the darkest places to find us, and that he meets us there. The punishment that has brought us peace was on him, that the body of Christ was broken for you, that the blood of Christ was shed for you. Now, normally we'd have some interactive activities in the sanctuary on a day like today, so we're going to have to save those for another time. But we would like to take a moment to partake of the communion table, together, yet separately. So we have these emblems, which represent the broken body and the shed blood. And I'd encourage you, if you recognize that in this moment you're holding more than just a piece of bread or a cracker, that you're reflecting on the cross and what Jesus did, that you would take this emblem and you would pray with me. God, we are horrified and comforted by all that Jesus went through on our behalf. We look to the cross and we can't imagine the cost. We are dumbfounded that your love would drive you to hang on that tree. We confess that we feel so unworthy of such a gift. We confess that we so often fall short in living the way that makes that sacrifice seem worth it. We come to you simply with gratitude, offering our lives to you once again. Your body was broken for us, and all that we can seem to muster is thank you. Thank you for your love. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for dying for me. partake of the bread together. And now the cup. This cup is the new covenant in Jesus' blood. He said it would be for the forgiveness of many, and you and I are included in that many. So would you hold your emblem and pray with me? Jesus, that you would spill your blood for me on this day, in this way, is beyond my comprehension. When I look to the cross, I fear I must turn away, for it is too much. It's too grand a gesture. It's too painful a reminder of what my sin has wrought. Forgive me. Forgive me for living as though this is not the greatest thing that anyone has ever done for me. And may I, this day of all days, recognize the power in your blood to change someone like me. May I sense the peace, the love, and the grace of the Father as I remember your sacrifice today. Let's partake of the cup together. We give thanks and we choose to remember. Perhaps you would like to read through the whole story of Jesus' crucifixion, his going to the cross on our behalf. You can find that in Matthew 27 if you want to do a little more reading. You can go back and check through the 7 last words of Jesus and reflect on those this Good Friday. I want to remind you that we're gathering online for Easter this year, and if you haven't heard what we're doing about our Easter window decorating, we're encouraging you to decorate your windows with some Easter themes. And then if you're wanting to tour around, we're collecting addresses of people who have decorated, and we'll be sending those out tomorrow. That's Saturday. You'll get an email from us if you register online. And you can do a little tour of the city, checking out all of the Easter window decorating. We're asking you to stay in your vehicles. Just go as your immediate family. Don't be carpooling. Don't be meeting up for coffee with anybody, but just allow this to be a time for you and your family, or for you yourself to just go and reflect on the resurrection of Jesus this Easter. We'll be sending out the tour guide on Saturday. Thanks for joining us on this digital Good Friday. And to borrow words from the brilliant Kate Bowler, have a beautiful, terrible day. Peace to you. See you Sunday.